And he looked at my husband, and he said to him, his name was David, and he said, "And you are Orbit." And my husband was kind of disappointed that his name wasn't a heavier name. He said, afterwards, he said, "You got a really cool name, and I got a dorky name." Anyway, so he gave me the name Electra, which was the name, of course, of the Greek play, but also it was the name of a star in the Pleiades, one of the seven sisters.
Gotcha.
And he said to both of us, but I remember him kind of really strongly focusing on me, and he said, "Do you think I'm God?" And I think everybody's God. So I said yes, because I did, but I didn't think he was the only God. But he said, "Do you think I'm God?" And I said yes. And he said, "Well, why don't you go back to San Francisco and tie up everything and come on back?" And then he called one of his sons and he said, "Son, take them to the airport." And that was kind of it. They took us to the airport, and we went back to San Francisco, and I think my friends thought I'd had a nervous breakdown or something, because I had beautiful vintage clothes from the 1940s. That was kind of my thing. I liked wearing vintage clothes from the 1940s, you know, right. The jewelry, the suits, the heels, everything. And we called everybody we knew, and we said, "Come over to our house and take what you want, because we're leaving." And I remember the sensation I had at that time. It was almost like I was looking at a photograph of my life and my house. I mean, I had a beautiful yoga room in this flat. We did yoga every day. And I had an art room with an easel and my paints and all my art supplies. And I can remember having the sensation, and a beautiful kitchen with floor-to-ceiling jars of herbs, because I was very into herbs then, as I am now, as a naturopathic doctor, but I had been studying herbs for several years, even before I went to the Source family.
Gotcha.
And our beautiful kitchen and our beautiful back patio and everything. And I remember feeling like I was looking at a photograph of that, and I could almost feel like the corners of the photograph were curling down, and it was basically ending.
Just a chapter ending.
So,
do you remember how old you were at that time?
I was 23.
Oh, gosh. So you were
I was 23, gotcha. College educated, double undergraduate degrees, graduated on the dean's list, you know. Gotcha. But also, when I was in college, I was what is now known as a creative. You know, I was in the art department, the theater department. I was doing a lot of consciousness expanding things out in the country in Athens, Ohio, where I did my undergraduate work, and just doing a lot of, experimenting, reading Aldous Huxley and, right. All of the psychedelic kind of things that were going on, and doing a lot of writing. So I was, more into that scene than I was into the Greek scene or drinking or anything like that.
Gotcha. Do you just to kind of trace back a little bit, when Baker or father-yod called somebody his sons, they were his kind of spiritual sons, is that correct?
Yes.
Gotcha.
He also had his own birth sons.
Oh, he did? I didn't know that.
Yes, he had his own birth sons too.
Okay.
Yes, but he had basically moved into a different dimension and taken on more consciousness, as he described it, and left that life behind and started this new one.
I see. And
he got married to a woman who was a lot younger than he was. Her name was Robin, and she became Ahom in the family, Ahom. And so everybody got a different name, and basically your past was over. That was it. Your past was over. So at the end of that time of giving away everything, we packed our car with some things we thought would be usable to us in the Source family. We put a couple of beautiful, beautiful antique rugs in the car. We had a station wagon. I put all of my art supplies in the car. My husband had a beautiful set of Snap-on tools. The big red floor-to-ceiling case, so we took all the tools out, and we took our tools and my camera and my paints and my jewelry supplies and some of my clothes that felt more goddessy than 1940s. And we got in the car and said goodbye to that flat and headed back down to Los Angeles. And when we came back to Los Angeles, we were gone for 3 days. It took us 3 days to get rid of everything, and we did it fast. I mean, I was in a hurry. I wanted to hurry up and get rid of everything and get back.
Gotcha.
because I was ready for the next chapter, the next journey.
Gotcha.
My husband was not so interested. Even when we left the first time to go down with our friends, he wasn't going to come because he was very happy in San Francisco. He was doing well financially. He didn't want to leave all of that. Mm-hmm. But I was hooked by the spiritual piece. And I remember we were on a second floor flat, so I remember going down and getting ready to go back with my friends. They were going to take me down. They were on their way back themselves. They had come to tie up some loose ties of their own in San Francisco. And I came back up the stairs to say goodbye to him. And I remember he was lying in bed with earphones on, listening to music. And I came back up because I had been getting things ready to go. And I came back up and I said, well, I'm leaving.
This episode is brought to you by Progressive. What's one thing you'd purchase with a little extra savings? A weighted blanket, smart speaker, that new self-care trend you keep hearing about. Well, Progressive wants to make sure you're getting what you want by helping you save money on car insurance. Drivers who save by switching to Progressive save over $700 on average, and customers can qualify for an average of 6 discounts when they sign up. Discounts like having multiple vehicles on your policy. Progressive offers outstanding coverage and award-winning claim service. Day or night, they have customer support 24/7, 365 days a year. When you need them most, they're at their best. A little off your rate each month goes a long way. Get a quote today at Progressive.com and see why 4 out of 5 new auto customers recommend Progressive. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. National annual average insurance savings by new customers surveyed who saved with Progressive between June 2020 and May 2021. Potential savings will vary, discounts vary, and are not available in all states and situations.
And he said, he took the earphones off, and I said, well, I'm leaving. And I gave him a kiss and a hug goodbye. And he said, well, wait a minute. Maybe I'll just go too. I don't want to stay. I just want to check it out. I said, well, I'm checking it out too, but I really feel a strong pull to go. He says, well, I'm going to come too. So he came downstairs and we got in the van and we went down. That was the first time when we first went down with our friends.
Gotcha. And so then when you moved down, they were expecting your return. Is that correct?
Well, I think Yahweh knew I would be coming back, and I think that's the reason he was kind of focusing on me that first morning after meditation, because he probably figured that if he could get me, he could get my husband too, because he could see the connection that my husband and I had with each other. And he was right, because I wanted to come back.
Gotcha.
And David came with me, just to, quote, check it out. But once he got there, he had a hard time, but he also was, I guess you could say, seduced on a lot of levels by the beautiful women.
Uh-huh.
The men were beautiful and the women were beautiful. We were all into health. I had been very into health, even in San Francisco, very into eating whole foods, organic foods, very into the meditation thing, very into herbs, homeopathics, all of that. So none of this was like new to me or foreign to me. It was just like an acceleration. And Yahweh always used to say that, and at one time he even said to me that life in the source was like a PhD in spirituality, because it was very concentrated, it was very intense, and there were a lot of changes. Things were changing all the time. If you weren't in morning meditation, you did not know what had happened, and no one was going to tell you about it either, because we lived in the now.
Gotcha.
You know, we lived in the now.
So everybody at his place went to morning meditation. So the entire
everybody went to morning meditation, except if a woman was nursing or had a child, she would maybe stay out so that the babies wouldn't be, interrupting or disturbing the meditation.
I see.
Anyway, it was very beautiful at the source. We had a restaurant, and I worked at the restaurant. I was a hostess at the restaurant, and we had a lot of celebrities come in. And
that was the one that was on Sunset, and
Sweetser.
Yes.
Sweetser, Sunset and Sweetser. And someone told me at one time that restaurant was the most successful natural foods restaurant in the country per square foot at that time. We had beautiful food, very much into consciousness and meditation, and in the serving of the food, and the food was delicious, and we ate the highest quality food up at the Father House too.
Were only Source members the employees of the restaurant, or were there other people? Okay.
No, just the people from the source.
Gotcha.
Maybe it was the most successful because nobody got paid. I don't know. I mean, I don't know how that figure ever came as far as being most successful, but none of us got paid, of course.
There were some interesting, in the documentary, they featured a couple films that were shot at the restaurant.
Right.
So
the Woody Allen film,
right.
where Annie Hall, where he said he comes into the restaurant on the terrace and he's feeling very awkward because everybody's very hip and beautiful, and he's kind of nerdy looking, in the film, and he sits down and a beautiful waitress sashays over and she says, "What can I get you?" And he goes, "Well, I'll have a plate of mashed yeast." Mashed yeast, which is really funny, sprouts and a plate of mashed yeast, because that is not anything that we ever serve, but it was just like a nerdy guy's way of trying to say something hip to a beautiful Aquarius-style waitress. But anyway, that time at the Father House was very magical. One of the things that was interesting to me, though, is, a lot of the information that is put out there about the Source family is that it was a big fairy tale, and it was wonderful, and everybody was so loving, and everybody was so sharing, and it was just the ideal community. And that actually is not the way it was. That's a glossy version. It wasn't like that. And I remember thinking how strange it was that some of the women were mean almost to me. And I remember thinking, this is supposed to be your consciousness group, and we're supposed to be loving with each other, and why is this person saying snide things to me or behaving this way towards me? I remember thinking that was so odd.
And did this start right when you moved in, or how did it kind of develop?
No, it started right when I moved in. Gotcha. Not all of the women were like that, but I was stunned that more than a few were like that, or were completely ignoring you, like you were invisible.
Gotcha. And
then, of course, there were a couple others who I'm still friendly with, who were very warm and welcoming. But that was one thing that struck me. I thought, well, this is kind of an incongruous thing. I don't quite get this. The men were very kind and very respectful and very loving. Not pursuing, though. The men in the family didn't really pursue you. That was kind of Yahweh's thing, is that the women were allowed to go where they wanted. And that's kind of one of the storylines, too, in the book and in the movie, the documentary that was done, is that the women were allowed to choose who they want, and no woman ever had to do anything she didn't really want to do. Well, that's not really true either.
So
because
what's the truth?
Pardon me?
What is the truth, then, if that wasn't true?
Everybody has their own reality, and I was actually assigned to someone to be with that man. One of the things Yahweh seemed to want to do was to kind of break down your protection and get you to a place where you could have bigger spiritual growth. That's what he would say. And so David and I came in together, and David and I are still together, by the way. We're the only couple that came in together that are still together.
Interesting. And
he, several months down the line, he assigned me, he called me into his room. He had one of his women who is kind of almost like a speaker now and a spokesperson from the source who says, calls herself one of his wives, and calls, she's kind of very predominant on the scene with the source, but she's actually the one that came down to get me. And she said, she took me upstairs to see Yahweh. By this time we were already living in Hawaii. We'd sold the Source restaurant.
Gotcha.
And we were living in Hawaii.
How long were you in LA with the group?
We came in 1974, and we were part of a group of about 15 or 20 that stayed behind to close up the Source restaurant as it was sold to another party. And so we were the last group to get on the plane and come to Hawaii.
And then what year was that?
Well, that was 74.
That was 74. Okay,
we sold the restaurant at the end of 1974.
Okay, I misunderstood. So and you got there in 71, is that correct, or 72?
No, I came to California in 71.
71. So
I came to Marin County in San Francisco in 1971.
And what year did you move to the Source family?
1974.
Okay, so you were just there for like a year before they